My childhood sweetheart, born into the same old money elite circle as me, fell in love with a poor, innocent damsel in distress from the wrong side of the tracks. To marry her, he withstood the pressure of his entire family and broke off his engagement with me. Heartbroken, I went abroad to further my studies. By the time I returned, he and Lily Evans had been married for almost 2 years, and I had long since moved on. But at my welcome home party, Preston Harrington, the man who once fought the entire world just to be with Lily, looked at the woman he had fought so hard to marry with icy disgust. With a chilling tone he snapped, "Didn't I tell you to stay at home? Why are you out here embarrassing me?" When I returned to the States, my close friends threw a massive, luxurious welcome home party for me. To my surprise, Preston Harrington showed up. 7 years ago, he was so blinded by his love for Lily Evans that he insisted on breaking our perfectly matched engagement. In front of all our elders, he had declared, if he couldn't marry Lily, he would rather marry a dog than marry me. Those words were so humiliating that they completely shattered the decades-long friendship between our two families. That day, I finally grew tired of it all. I cried in front of my parents for an hour, begging them to call off the engagement. I told them I didn't want Preston anymore. I told them I didn't want him. I didn't want to marry him. My parents looked at me with aching hearts and finally relented. They went to the Harringtons' estate and had a closed-door meeting for an hour. The final verdict was spun not as Preston rejecting me, but as the Sterling family refusing to marry off their daughter. With things escalating to that point, the engagement was voided. While our families didn't completely sever ties and become sworn enemies, the relationship undeniably froze over. Shortly after, I left for Paris to study. Until today, when I finally returned, I looked at Preston. Compared to 7 years ago, he had grown taller and much more composed. His handsome face carried an aristocratic, aloof coldness, and his dark eyes were fixed intently on me. No one had told me Preston would be here. I turned to look at my best friend, Sophie, who was hosting the event. Sophie hurriedly waved her hands to clear her name, explaining, "I didn't invite him, Claire. I have no idea where Preston heard you were coming back, but he volunteered to take over and host this welcome home party for you." She guiltily added a redundant disclaimer. "It really wasn't me, I swear. I didn't say a word." Instead, Preston chuckled. His tone was gentle, exactly like it used to be back before our fallout, when he would pick me up for school every morning. "Claire, it's been so many years. I was young and reckless back then, and I handled things terribly. I hurt you. So today, I brazenly took over as host because I wanted to formally apologize." He paused, looking directly into my eyes, and continued, "Do you still hold a grudge about the past?" Look at how he phrased that. If I said I still held a grudge, it would make me look petty and unable to let him go, so I looked up and gave him a dazzling, magnanimous smile. "You said it yourself, it's in the past. We all ran in the same circles, and it really had been a long time." He meant absolutely nothing to me. Now I picked up a glass of champagne and smiled breezily. "Sophie mentioned that you and Lily got married over a year ago. I haven't congratulated you yet. Here's to you." His expression remained flat. Logically, having successfully married the girl of his dreams, even with his naturally stoic personality, he shouldn't be looking this indifferent. Before I could even process his reaction, he picked up his glass and downed it in one go. It didn't look like he was accepting a blessing. It looked like he was drowning his sorrows. But I couldn't be bothered to care. Reuniting with old friends naturally led to endless catching up. Since I was the guest of honor, everyone hyped me up, and the topics revolved entirely around me. Someone asked how many boyfriends I had in France. Someone brought up my global art exhibition tour. Another friend complained half-jokingly, "Seriously, Claire, why do you have to be so overachieving? Tickets to your gallery exhibitions are impossible to get, and you've opened so many galleries worldwide. My old man constantly compares me to you, sighing about how I only know how to chase celebrities, shop for Birkins, and race sports cars." I laughed. "It's just a hobby." Preston, who had been sitting silently on the sidelines, smiled. "After all these years, you've finally learned to be humble." His tone, how should I put it? It was as natural as an old friend's, laced with an intimate familiarity. It was as if we had never had our messy falling out, as if he had never said those agonizingly cruel things to me just to defend Lily. I didn't quite know how to respond. I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination, but his tone felt almost flirtatious. While I was still debating how to reply, he added, I went to see your exhibition, Dance of Shadows. It was breathtaking. Now it wasn't just me. Even the friends sitting around us sensed something was off. They fell silent, their gazes darting subtly between me and Preston. My expression didn't change as I politely replied, oh thank you. After a brief pause, I jokingly reminded him, did you go see it with Lily? Speaking of which, why didn't she come today? I haven't seen her in years, and we are old high school classmates after all. His expression cooled again, and he said dismissively, oh she's busy at home. He said it as if he were talking about an irrelevant stranger. I had no idea why he was using such a dismissive tone and attitude when referring to the woman he had once loved so recklessly. But I had no desire to get tangled in his mess. So I just let out a polite laugh and steered the conversation elsewhere. It wasn't until the party ended, and we walked out to the club's lobby that we saw Lily sitting on the lounge sofas. Her eyes were glued to the private VIP elevator. Her expression is a mix of anxiousness, distress, and insecurity. The moment the elevator doors dinged open, she shot up from the sofa. It looked like she had been sitting there the entire time, just waiting for us to come down. Everyone paused. She tried her best to force a smile, scanning the group until her eyes landed on me standing next to Preston. Instantly, the color drained from her face. She stared at me, looking completely crestfallen and panicked, as if she were facing her greatest enemy. I found the whole thing baffling. Lily had changed a lot. I remembered the first time I saw her. It was the second semester of our sophomore year when she transferred to our prep school. Back then, she stood at the front of the classroom wearing a faded uniform. She was so thin she looked malnourished, the clothes hanging loosely off her frame. Her features were plain and unremarkable, and her face was painted with awkward, nervous tension. Our homeroom teacher, however, smiled brightly. This is Lily Evans, who consistently ranks at the very top of the statewide standardized tests. Let's make her feel welcome. A silence fell over the room as countless assessing gazes landed on Lily. We were at an elite, ultra-exclusive private academy. Everyone came from old money or massive wealth. Grades were absolutely not the only ticket to acceptance here, let alone someone with Lily's unrefined, shabby appearance. I felt a bit of pity for her at the time, so I smiled and was the first to start clapping. Only then did scattered applause ripple through the classroom, eventually growing until it filled the room. The teacher shot me a grateful smile, pointed at me and told Lily, "That's our class president, Claire Sterling. If you need any help, you can go to her." Despite the teacher's words, Lily never once came to me for help. When Lily transferred in, the only empty desk was the one next to Preston Harrington. So Lily became Preston's deskmate. I don't know if the feelings that eventually betrayed me started budding right there. For example, because Lily's family was so poor, she suffered from severe hypoglycemia and anemia. Once, during morning study hall, she suddenly fainted. It was Preston who scooped her up and carried her to the nurse's office. Another time, Preston's mother came back from a trip to Belgium and brought a mountain of gifts for both me and Preston. When she told me to pick first, Preston, who was standing nearby, grabbed a box of artisanal chocolates and said, "I'll take this box of candy." I was confused at the time because Preston despised anything sweet, and I had never known him to have a sudden fondness for chocolate. Later, he even asked me for my private chef's pastry recipes. I thought it was too much of a hassle, so I just had my chef bake the pastries and sent them directly to him. Back then, I genuinely thought Preston's palate had just changed. It wasn't until later, when I saw the artisanal chocolate wrappers and the pastries my chef had made sitting on Lily's desk, that it clicked. The one who loved chocolate was Lily. The one who loved sweet pastries was Lily. I convinced myself that it was just Preston's way of looking out for his struggling deskmate. Even though Preston had never been the kind, meddlesome type to go out of his way to save anyone. Truthfully, it wasn't that I never had suspicions. It was just that Lily was so incredibly plain that I never entertained the thought that Preston would betray me and fall for her. After all, I was exceptional. I was the prettiest girl in the entire academy. Back when Gossip Girl was at the peak of its popularity, people affectionately gave me the nickname Queen C. Not because I was a schemer, but because I had the perfect family, perfect grades, and perfect popularity. How could I have possibly imagined that? Preston Harrington would betray me and fall for Lily Evans? She walked over and offered a polite smile, greeting me. Claire, you're back? After speaking, her eyes shifted hesitantly between me and Preston. The probing, suspicious nature of her gaze made me deeply uncomfortable, and I frowned slightly in displeasure. Preston spoke first, his tone freezing cold. What are you doing here? Lily carefully gauged his mood, her smile turning into a pathetic, fawning attempt to please him. I was out shopping. The club owner mentioned you and your friends were hosting a welcome home party for Claire here today, so I thought I'd wait and we could go home together. The excuse was full of holes. She then held up the shopping bag in her hand to show Preston. The manager here heard I was in the lobby, so he specially brought over 2 bottles of wine. He said it was a token of respect for Mr. and Mrs. Harrington. She heavily emphasized the words, Mrs. Harrington, as if trying to assert her territory. Preston, who had already been looking cold, furrowed his brows in deep irritation at those words. Behind me, I heard a friend fail to stifle a quiet snort of laughter. Given the Harrington family's status, let alone a mere floor manager, even the owner of this ultra-exclusive club would have to book an appointment half a month in advance just to get a meeting with Preston. Yet here she was, the wife of Preston Harrington, treating 2 bottles of wine from a manager like a rare treasure, presenting them to him like an offering. It was undeniably tacky and completely beneath their social standing. It was obvious that humiliating incidents like this had happened many times over the year and a half Lily had been married to Preston. Because Preston's voice was filled with sheer impatience, completely devoid of any politeness. Didn't I tell you to stay at home? Why are you out here embarrassing me? Behind me. Someone laughed out loud. Lily's already pale face instantly turned paper white. She looked at Preston in total panic. She had no idea why Preston had suddenly snapped, nor did she know what she had done wrong. No one explained the reason to her, and no one taught her how to act. Everyone was just laughing at her lack of class and unrefined behavior. I, however, was quite surprised by Preston's reaction. I instinctively turned to look at him. His face was stoic, completely unmoved by the suppressed laughter of the crowd. As if the person being openly mocked wasn't the wife he had sacrificed so much to marry. I froze for a second. He didn't used to be like this. Back then, because she didn't fit in, Lily had faced her fair share of collective ostracization in class. Later, when Preston demanded to break our engagement for her, I had bullied Lily too. But every single time, Preston would step right in front of Lily, taking her side and protecting her fiercely. Yet now, standing here looking down at the woman in front of him, his expression was icy, and deep within his eyes was a barely concealed layer of exhaustion and impatience. He was like a completely different person from the boy he used to be. How could he be disgusted by Lily? Had he forgotten exactly what he put me through just to defend her? A few months after Claire's return, rumors began spreading through their social circle. Lily has moved out of the Harrington estate. At first, everyone assumes it's another temporary argument. After all, Lily had spent years desperately trying to hold the marriage together. Then the divorce papers are filed. The entire city is shocked. The woman Preston once fought his entire family to marry is the one leaving him. When reporters eventually corner Lily outside a courthouse, they ask if she regrets giving up her marriage to one of the country's most eligible men. For a moment she says nothing. Then she smiles. Not the nervous, people-pleasing smile Claire remembers from school. A calm one. The smile of someone finally at peace. I spent years trying to become the woman he wanted, she says. One day I realized I had no idea who I was anymore. And that's all. No accusations. No drama. No revenge. Just freedom. Meanwhile Preston spirals. Not because he loves Lily anymore, but because for the first time in his life someone chose to walk away from him. He starts showing up at Claire's events, making excuses to contact her, trying to recreate the familiarity they once had. But Claire only becomes more distant. One evening he finally asks the question that's been haunting him. Do you think things would have been different if I'd married you? Claire looks at him for a long moment, then smiles politely. I don't know. Which is a lie. They both know it. Because the real answer is that he never would have appreciated her either. The problem was never Lily. The problem was Preston. Years later, Claire hears that Lily has completed a graduate degree and opened an educational foundation for disadvantaged students. The same girl who once sat in class terrified of not belonging now spends her life helping other kids find opportunities. As for Preston, he's still rich, still successful, still admired. But every time he sees a photo of Claire's happy marriage or reads an article about Lily's achievements, he's reminded of one thing. He had both women in his life, and through his own choices he lost them both. A year after returning home, Claire's newest gallery opened in New York. The opening night was packed with collectors, celebrities, and journalists. As she stood in front of a crowd giving her speech, she spotted a familiar face near the back. Lily. The two women hadn't spoken since the night of the welcome home party. For a moment neither moved. Then Lily walked over. She looked completely different. Not because of expensive clothes or jewelry, but because she finally seemed relaxed, confident, happy. "Congratulations," Lily said sincerely. "The gallery is beautiful." Claire smiled. "Thank you." After a brief silence, Lily laughed softly. "You know, back in high school I was terrified of you." Claire nearly choked on her champagne. "Terrified of me? You were beautiful, talented, rich, popular. You seemed perfect." Claire shook her head. "And I thought you were fearless." Both women burst out laughing. For the first time, they saw each other not as rivals but as two women who had been dragged into the same mess by the same man. Before leaving, Lily handed Claire a business card. She had founded a scholarship program for underprivileged students. The logo on the card made Claire smile. "You did well." Lily's eyes softened. "So did you." Then she walked away. And that chapter of their lives finally closed. Later that evening, someone slipped an arm around Claire's waist. She looked up and smiled instantly. Her fiancé. The man she'd met in Paris. The man who had never compared her to anyone else. Never taken her for granted. Never made her compete for affection. He handed her a glass of champagne. "Nervous?" "A little." "Good. Good." He grinned. "It means you still care." Claire laughed. 7 years ago, she had cried herself to sleep because a boy named Preston Harrington didn't choose her. Now she could barely remember what that heartbreak had felt like. Not because the pain hadn't been real, but because her life had become so much bigger than it. Across the room, she caught sight of Preston standing alone. He had attended the opening as a guest. Nothing more. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a small nod. Claire returned it politely. Then she turned away. Not out of anger. Not out of resentment. Simply because she had someone else she would rather look at. Her fiancé squeezed her hand. The crowd erupted into applause as the evening's ceremony began. Claire looked around at her friends, her family, her career, and the future waiting ahead of her. For years, she thought losing Preston had been the greatest tragedy of her life. Standing there now, she finally understood the truth. It had been the luckiest thing that ever happened to her.